Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do my monthly reading wrap-up. I've been having a really good reading year, and May was no exception. There were some really great books in this collection, and I'm really excited to talk about them. There are two that I have not really talked about, even in a Friday Reads video. So I'm really excited to talk about them because this is the first time I will be talking about them having finished the books. Even the ones that I'm not quite thrilled about are really interesting to talk about, which is a really cool place to be, and there's nothing I outright hated, which is really good. Although there are two DNFs, and I didn't get really far enough into either one of them to fully talk about them, except to maybe just mention that there are two books I started, really did not get far into, and abandoned pretty quickly. The first one is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. I think I got about 30 minutes into the audio, realized I wasn't paying attention, went back to the beginning, got about 25 minutes in, realized I still wasn't paying attention, went back to the beginning and got about 35 minutes into it and realized I just really was not enjoying it or in the mood for it at all. So I abandoned it completely. I don't know that I'm going to revisit it at all. It's not something that seems like I would enjoy based on what I was experiencing from the beginning of the book. I'm still interested in checking out Patricia Lockwood's book, Priest Daddy, which is a memoir, and maybe that will be a lot better for me. A lot of people commented to say that they had similar problems with No One Is Talking About This, so I'm feeling like it wouldn't get better if I tried again. And the other one is Jasper Jones by Craig Silvey. I did end up returning that to the library. I will revisit in maybe July or August or at some point down the road and see if I'm enjoying it. I was torn between two different books and chose the other one. And because it's a library book, I didn't want to just hold on to it for the sake of holding on to it. So I returned it to the library after only getting about 10 pages in. And because I only got about 10 pages in, don't feel like I can talk about it either way. I feel like I have a more definitive thing to say about No One Is Talking About This because I tried 3 times to get into it and just failed spectacularly. Jasper Jones is something that I would probably circle back to if there's time later on in the year, and we will see how that goes. By the way, I already did a video with my June TBR, and I will link that in the description box down below, so if you would like to check that out, please feel free to go ahead and do that. Lately, I've been kind of rolling TBRs into my reading wrap-ups for the month, and I'm not doing that this month because I actually have something of a TBR for June, but I'm calling it a pile of possibilities instead of really anything more concrete as a TBR. If you follow along, you know I don't tend to do great with TBRs. I am moving into a place where I like to think of them a lot more as hopefuls or, as I said, a pile of possibilities, because that way it takes away the stress and it lets everybody know that they are just options that I am looking at and can choose from as I need new books to read. So that's the way my June TBR works in as much as it is an actual TBR. If you want to know, check it out down below. Moving into the stuff that I read in May, the first book that I finished in the month of May was The Mountain, which is stories by Paul Yoon. I had been really wanting to do something that would honor AAPI Heritage Month. That's Asian American or Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I had also been wanting to read a book by Paul Yoon. So as I was looking for audiobooks that I could listen to, I found that this one was immediately available and I listened to it. The audio production is good by and large, but it does make it a little confusing to know when you're moving into a new story, because part of the problem is these short stories are broken into something like chapters. So sometimes it's hard to tell when a chapter in a story is ending and when a new story is beginning. I frequently had to end up going back to try to figure out where I was and if this was a new story or what, and that was a little annoying. By and large, I really enjoyed this book. Paul Yoon is clearly a really beautiful writer, and the book just sings with a sort of loneliness and sadness, which is not necessarily something you might want to feel, especially given how tough the last year has been. But it's a really beautiful book, and it creates this very vivid sense of mood, which is not something that a lot of people do. But because of the sadness and the loneliness, I did feel myself sort of intentionally keeping the book at arm's length. However, I really enjoyed it, and I'm very much excited to read more books by Paul Yoon. I really want to get to Run Me to Earth, which is a book that some people have predicted as a sort of spoiler for the Pulitzer Prize this year, I will link my Pulitzer Prize predictions video down below. I think it could definitely have an outside shot at that. I don't think a lot of people know who Paul Yoon is, but I feel like that's starting to change. People are starting to catch on. And with Viet Thanh Nguyen, who won the Pulitzer Prize for The Sympathizer, on the board this year, I think it could potentially get some eyes in his direction if, of course, the Pulitzer jury puts this book in front of the board. But, I don't want to get into it too much. If you're interested in that angle, please check out the longer video about my Pulitzer Prize predictions in the description box down below. Then I finished Paradise, Nevada by Dario Diofebi. This was one of my most anticipated books of 2021. Yes, I will link that video down below as well. I don't know if you're sensing a theme, but there will be a lot of things that you can check out in the description box down below for further viewing. What was most interesting about this book was that it's something I probably would have loved if I had read it or if it had existed in my early 20s. It's exactly the type of book I would have loved then. It's a little bit quirky, it's about a big topic, it has sort of interconnecting characters, and that was the kind of thing I was really into back then. And it's not that I'm not into it now, but it also does feel like Paradise, Nevada is a bit of a throwback or like a book out of time. It also feels like it would fit in a little more with the publishing landscape of the time when I was in my early 20s. It's a book that's much more about an idea than the characters themselves. Like, the characters are not super deep, they're not very well developed, and they're not really interesting either, except as tools to get at this larger idea of Las Vegas as a microcosm for America, which I think is a really interesting approach to a book, and one that I'm kind of surprised not many more people have latched onto. I think I've only read one other book that has really dug into that, and it's a fascinating idea. I went to Las Vegas in 2013, and one of the most interesting things about it is that it is a town that is designed in every inch of what it is. And this is the first book I've read that really got at that sense that I got of the town itself. And what's also interesting is that it talks about how it creates this embodiment of the American dream. It's supposed to be a place where everybody has an even playing field. People can win no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their education is. The reality is that it's not that. People who have more advantages do tend to do better. And another really big embodiment of that is the title itself. And the meaning behind the title is that Las Vegas, as we know it, does not actually exist, because the majority of the Vegas Strip, the airport that takes you to the Strip, and most of the hotels in that area are not actually within the town of Las Vegas. They are actually in an unincorporated town called Paradise, Nevada. So this whole idea of Las Vegas itself is not real. And that's really interesting. So there are a lot of interesting ideas in this book, but Dario Diofebi is clearly more interested in the ideas than he is in the people and the characters and the story. And one of the things about that is that there's this big sprawling cast of characters. He doesn't introduce you to them very well. You get about 150 pages in before he finally introduces the last character, and you'd spend a lot more time getting to know the first person, and then you meet the second person, and then you go back to the first person, and then it takes a long time to get to know everybody who's going to be involved in this story. And it never really felt like the stakes were very high. You know that there is a fictional casino in Las Vegas, and there is a bombing, it burns down, and the characters that you follow are involved in some way. But it never really felt high stakes to me at all, and I think that's because Dario Diofebi doesn't really see the characters as important so much as the ideas behind the novel. So I did enjoy parts of this, but I also think it's way longer than it should be. And I definitely skimmed large portions of the last half of this book to get to the end. So I don't think that counts as a DNF, because I know what happened. I know a lot of the things that happened in the middle, but I definitely didn't get a lot of the detail. However, even without the detail, I feel like I got everything I need to get, which is not necessarily good. I still think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about in this book, but it wasn't a really great, fulfilling experience either, if that makes sense. A little bit like Vegas. Then we get to one of the big ones. I finished The Bad Muslim Discount next by Syed M. Masood. I actually listened to this on audio, but I happen to have a copy of the physical book, which I could hold up, and I really enjoyed this book a lot. I talked about it at length in a Friday Reads video, which I will also link down below if you would like to check that out, because I had a lot of things to say about this book. I think there's just a lot to talk about. It is a funny book. It is a sad book, an interesting book. It gets at these really deep, heavy ideas without ever feeling like it's trying to teach you something. And it's really astonishingly well done. It follows two characters. The first one is Anwar, who is born in Karachi and who immigrates to the United States because of extremism as a young child. He actually goes to high school in the United States, and he does a pretty good job incorporating into the United States. This is not really an immigration story so much as it is about his struggle to deal with his family and his family's religion and the idea of what it is to be a good Muslim or a bad Muslim. This book deals with a lot of gray areas. He has this brother who is the sort of quote-unquote perfect Muslim and perfect son and perfect brother, and yet there are blind spots that he has that make him not always the good person he's supposed to be. And Anwar, who is supposed to be a bad Muslim, a bad brother, a bad son, has a lot of things about him that actually make him a good person. There's this really interesting interplay between ideas like that. And then the other story is Safwa, who is born in Baghdad and ultimately immigrates to the United States as an adult. And it's about the ways in which she is trapped. She sees her religion, her society, as something that has trapped her as someone who has no power and no options. And she is trying to grasp at ways to create that for herself. And yet she's also clinging to parts of that. She brings along her very conservative father, even though he is one of the people who is taking her options away from her. And there's this really interesting push and pull in her story as well. Of course, she and Anwar eventually cross paths in the United States, and not necessarily in the way that you might expect. I really enjoyed this book a lot, and I would definitely recommend it. This is something that I feel like I will be singing its praises all year long and just hoping that more people pick it up and get to know it and the story. I think it's really interesting and just fantastic. The next book that I finished in the month of May is something that I actually already returned to the library. It's How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House, and that is also something that I already covered in a Friday Reads video, so I will link that one down below if you would like more about it. But this is another book that I really enjoyed, not as much as The Bad Muslim Discount, but really enjoyed nonetheless. It follows a burglary in Barbados that goes wrong and all of the complications that come from that. I really enjoyed the story. It can be very difficult to read. There are a lot of really unhappy things that happen in this book and a lot of unhappy situations. There are trigger warnings aplenty. So if there are topics that you don't necessarily like to read about or be reminded about or try to avoid in general, check a little bit further into that for this book, because this might not be the book for you. But if you can deal with those things, it is a really interesting story. And I think Cherie Jones is a great writer who does a lot of interesting things with what could have been a very complicated story that could have easily gotten unwound as she moved the pieces around. And I just think she did a fantastic job. I really enjoyed it a lot. The next one is a book I'm not going to say the title of, and if you follow along, you know why. I'm just going to hold it up and let you read it for yourself. I am a big fan of Fun Home, which is Alison Bechdel's graphic memoir about her childhood and her relationship with her father. I am significantly less of a fan of her follow-up to that book, which is called Are You My Mother, and is about her relationship with her mother. I thought that book was way too introspective to the point that it doesn't actually reveal anything interesting at all. And I think because her mother was still alive at the time she was writing it, she definitely hedged in certain ways that she did not with Fun Home. This is actually a collection of the cartoon strips that gave her a cult following. The cartoon is, of course, the name of the book, which I am not going to say. And I had a bit of a difficult time with this, as much as I enjoyed parts of it. And I had a difficult time figuring out why that was. I think I finally cracked the code. So parts of this book can feel a little bit dated, but it's also a really good time capsule because it is written in the late 80s and the early 90s into the mid 90s. And it portrays a very specific idea or stereotype of what the lesbian community and the LGBTQ community was like at that time. And I thought that was maybe it because I was only about 10 years old when most of that happened, and I know of a lot of it. It seems familiar to me, but I wasn't part of it. That's not actually it. It's that a lot of the storylines in this book are a bit melodramatic. It's very soap opera-ish. And I am at a point in my life where I'm not really into that. And I think that's what was really keeping me at a remove. There are a lot of affairs, there's a lot of cheating, a lot of breakups, sometimes people get back together, there are secret crushes and things like that that kind of move the storyline along through all of the different cartoons. And I think that's where I was really disengaging from the story more than anything. And I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. But I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I finally got to experience the cartoon. I just didn't really love it as much as I had kind of thought I would. The next book that I finished in the month of May was Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This is a book that the more I think about, the more I'm not convinced I liked at all. And yet, it's really interesting to talk about. I've had some interesting conversations in comments and on Instagram about this book, and it seems like a lot of people read this book in a different way. But I definitely wanted to like this book a lot more than I actually did. If you are unfamiliar, it is written in the form of a screenplay. I did a sort of hybrid of the audiobook and the print book because I would refer back and forth between them. And it follows Willis Wu, who is generic Asian man on a cop show on TV. And what's interesting about what Charles Yu does is that he really fuses reality and fantasy. Like, there's really no delineation between the world of the TV show and the real world. Everything is happening in this sort of hybrid of both. Imagine your life is this cop show, except you never stop acting. There's never really any off-camera life for you. And then if you move to a different TV show, you basically move to a completely different reality. And what Charles Yu is doing is he is taking the idea of stereotyping in plot and in terms of character and all of these familiar tropes and storylines that we know, and using them to reveal how we tend to think about race and character in the United States and in society at large. And that part is interesting, but I never really felt interested in any of the other stuff that was going on in this book. And there's a courtroom scene at the end that just completely lost me. It felt very cheesy, very staged and hammy. The format of the book could lend itself to that really well, except it felt like the author was saying, hang on. Let me just explain everything I'm trying to do in this book to you. And I did not like that at all. So sometimes you think about a book and you end up liking it more and appreciating what it was doing. The more I think about this book, the more I sort of dislike it and feel like I was actively trying to like it more than I actually did. But I respect that there are a lot of people who like this. This is another book that is in the conversation for the Pulitzer Prize this year, and we'll see what happens with that. If it wins, I will understand why. I won't be particularly enthused, though. The next book that I read in the month of May is something I'm really excited to talk about. I have not talked about it in a Friday Reads video yet. I had only just started it in my last Friday Reads video, so I didn't really get into it too much. It's The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott, and this is something that was recommended to me by one of the co-owners of the Montana Book Company. I really enjoyed this book a lot. I mentioned in my Friday Reads video that the opening of the book is sort of like a fable or a little bit like a fairy tale, and that style carries through the rest of the book, although the rest of the book is not a contained story. It is a larger story spread out across the course of the book, and it goes in so many interesting and unexpected directions. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there is at least one part of this book that has given me, not nightmares per se, but I can't stop thinking about it and being creeped out by it. So ostensibly, this book is the story of a farmer in a remote area after there has been a coup in this unnamed country. She is living alone in the wilderness and kind of isolated and just trying to get by. An army unit comes into her area, and it is led by a female soldier who wants her help and is not going to take no for an answer. She is looking for the Rain Heron, which is a mythical creature that can change the weather. And that is the description of the book on the back cover. However, that happens very early on in the book, and it goes on in a lot of interesting directions from there. But I don't really want to talk about them because I feel like talking about them would spoil a lot of it. So the description is accurate, but only really for the first third of the book. It goes on in a lot of other directions from there, and don't let that be something that discourages you from this book. I definitely recommend it. It's so good. This is something that is longlisted for the Miles Franklin Award, which is an Australian literary prize, and I really hope it does well. I'm not very familiar with a lot of the other books that are in there, but this is just a fantastic book. Definitely up there among my favorite reads of the year so far, and it's going to be interesting to see where it lands. I am not usually a big sci-fi or fantasy reader, but this is such a good book. And Robbie Arnott is, of course, male, but he does a really great job writing female characters, and they are strong and vulnerable, and even when they do bad or unlikable things, I always feel like I understand them. So much of the writing in this book is going to stick with me for a very long time. I feel like I'm going to be thinking about it for a long, long time, and I'm so glad my husband read this before I did, because as soon as I finished, I needed to have somebody to talk to about this book. And I'm so glad he was there because that's the kind of book this is. It's something that you will think about. It's something you really enjoy and will carry with you after it's already done. And you will want to talk to people about it. And you'll have little theories about some things that happened in it. And it's just that good. So I definitely recommend checking out The Rain Heron by Robbie Arnott if you have not already. It's so good. It's the real deal. The final book that I got in the month of May came right down to the wire. It's The Office of Historical Corrections, a novella, and stories by Danielle Evans. This is a little bit similar to Interior Chinatown in that I feel like I wanted to like this book more than I actually did, but I definitely liked it a lot more than Interior Chinatown. I think there was a great degree of hype for this book. A lot of people told me I was going to love it. A lot of people said it's so good, and I got really excited to read it. And then I read it, and I liked it. And then it feels disappointing because you didn't love it. And then I feel bad talking about it that way because it's still a really good book. I just didn't love it as much as I kind of thought I would. So as the title says, this is a novella and a collection of stories. Danielle Evans is a good writer. I never felt super invested in any of the stories. I never felt really transported. I think she does a lot of really great character work in this book and frequently reveals a lot about depression and about race without headlining what she's doing. She does it in very subtle ways, and I always enjoyed what happened, but I didn't love it. So I feel like this is probably going to end up being a middle-of-the-road book for this year, and I feel bad saying that because, again, I just wanted to like this book a lot more than I did, and I did like it. I don't want to oversell my reaction to it, but you know, I felt like I was going to like it a lot more than I did. This is another book that a lot of people mention as a potential winner of the Pulitzer Prize this year. So we will see what happens with that. So those are the books that I read in the month of May. If you have read any of them, I would love to hear what you thought of them in the comment section down below. If you have recommendations based on these, please let me know that as well. If you just have general thoughts or would like to tell me something that you read, enjoyed, or disliked in the month of May, please let me know in the comment section down below. We are into Pride Month, and I am going to be starting my Pride Month reading today. I'm very excited about that. And again, if you want to check out my TBR, it's in the description box down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.